And welcome back to another game in GP Caracas. This time it's round 2, and it's elmikkino versus InsertName. Elmikkino is on Black Red Burn, and InsertName is on Temur Temple. InsertName is quite favored in this matchup because a Temur Temple is the sort of deck that eats aggro decks for breakfast. Well, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but yeah, Temur Temple has a really good matchup against low to ground aggro decks, especially stuff like Burn, because available Meddler, it can counter the 1-mana burn spells, and then you also have Bounty of the Gardens, which ambush burns creatures. So elmikkino gets an opening hand that contains called Axlinger, as well as a fetch land. Axlinger becomes a 3/3 as long as any player lost exactly 3 life this turn. It seems like elmikkino only runs 2 pain lands in their deck, so that means Sunlit Island can't fetch pain land. So that means Cult Axlinger won't be able to be a 3/3. So that's extremely bad for elmikkino, because one of the big advantages of Burn is being able to attack with a turn 1 3/3 haster by going Shock Fetch into Pain Land into Cult Axlinger. So InsertName has a hand with available Meddler, which they're probably going to keep up to eat a burn spell. And something else with InsertName's deck is that they also run Pain Lands, so if elmikkino tries to enable Cult Axlinger by burning their opponent, InsertName can easily just fetch a Pain Land and then ping themselves in order to turn off Cult Axlinger. So elmikkino plays a no good gun pointer, Adventure, which drains InsertName for 3, and InsertName decides to spell pierce it. I guess they don't want to deal with a 3-mana 3/1 coming down later, and it also prevents Cult Axlinger from attacking for 3. InsertName decides to fetch a basic. I guess they don't want to be taking damage from Crystal Caverns, and they draw Mattia. So Mattia will be able to ambush a Cult Axlinger if it doesn't get buffed. And InsertName plays Magmatic Torrent tapped. elmikkino will be able to enable Cult Axlinger this turn. I guess they can self-enable it by playing an untapped fetch land and then tapping the Crumbling Precipice. They can also just enable it by scorching their opponent's face. And they probably want to self-enable it just to play around counter spells. And it seems like elmikkino doesn't self-enable the Cult Axlinger, and they just decide to only attack for 1. Playing Rapacious rather than no. That feels like a really weird order to do stuff in. I guess they're worried about InsertName can't Cane Dancer back counter spell, so they were worried about actually, yeah, why would they play Rapacious Rattler post combat? If they played Rattler pre-combat, they could hit InsertName for 3 and then attack as a 3/3 cult. And even if it gets countered, then if it gets countered, then it's not really. Then there isn't really a difference between whether you play it pre or post combat. I think elmikkino is just playing this game really weirdly. Okay, and now InsertName gets available Meddler 1-drop, and that's basically why Temur Temple is really good against Burn, because Veilborn Meddler just comes down and eats a burn spell. Now elmikkino doesn't have a way to trigger Cult this turn, so they can't even attack. And next turn they can, assuming Seer of the Sea survives, they can Seer of the Sea pings elmikkino, and then they play an untapped Shock Land or Shock Fetch, which makes them lose 3 life this turn, and then they can attack with a 3/3 Cult. But InsertName is probably just killing the Cult Axlinger now. And they can also kill the Seer of the Sea with Ignition Point. Instead, they're going to flash in Mattia, and that gets Veilborn Meddler trigger, so InsertName has a board full of quickly growing creatures. And yeah, InsertName decides to put the counter on Mattia. So InsertName draws another Veilborn Meddler, which they can use to counter any burn spell that elmikkino draws. InsertName probably thinking about whether to attack or not. So, InsertName decides to activate Mattia's ability, and that does tap it, so that allows Mattia to play counter on a creature. and then force elmikkino to lose a creature by blocking. elmikkino is going to concede there because they're not really going to win from that position as burn. On to sideboarding though. InsertName's matchup gets even better after sideboard because they have Spell Pierce, Solar Flare, Eldraine's Rage, all as options against burn. Kalilia might also be decent against burn just to ambush their creatures. You might also want to bring in Steel Pandemonium to hit the burn spells, although still might be a bit too slow for a burn. Against for burn though, they probably want to bring in some more high end because those cards can't be countered by Veilborn Meddler, so Rapacious Rattler and No Good Gunpointer also is something that can't be hit by Meddler. They might want to bring in Rage of the Ravage just to turn off the Solar Flares and any other possible life gain that they have. Then Rousing Revel also allows them to go under counters. So back for game 2, both players have drawn their opening hand and are thinking about whether to first mate or not. And yeah, InsertName does have Mabel as a first mate. They're actually a 4-color. Well, they're mostly a Temur deck, but they are a 4-color flash deck. Splashing White for Sweep the Leg and Mabel. So both players decide to put the first mate into their hand this game. And elmikkino has a pretty good curve as a burn deck. They have turn 1 creature, and turn 2 Hugo, and then turn 3 Rapacious Rattler. And InsertName has 2 Veilborn Meddlers, but the good news for elmikkino is that since they're playing on curve, the Veilborn Meddlers don't really do anything. elmikkino goes to their second turn, so whoever pings both players. elmikkino draws another land for Rapacious Rattler on turn 3. So right now, elmikkino decides they want to play Hugo into any possible counter spells, and yeah, InsertName obliges. Probably going to cast Cosmic Sinkhole here. The Renew Grove is a pretty interesting land. It's basically an Evolving Wilds, except it puts the land into play untapped. But if you fetched on the turn that Renew Grove entered the battlefield, then the land it puts into play doesn't untap during your next turn. But since InsertName is running a mostly instant speed deck, they can crack the Renewal Grove on the opponent's turn, and the basic that comes in will untap as normal. And elmikkino decides just to not play anything. They don't want to play Rapacious Rattler into any counter spells, I guess. And they're just going to do end of turn Fiery Burst. InsertName, seeing that elmikkino didn't do anything, gets the opportunity to flash in Mattia at the end of turn. And now InsertName gets to make a decision about whether to attack with Mattia or not. Because if they attack with Mattia, it'll get a counter, but then won't be able to block. So they do decide to attack with Mattia, and elmikkino decides to use their burn spell on a creature. I guess it's because if Mattia gets the 3 counters, then UVC can't really attack past it. Seems like InsertName decides to Veilborn Meddler to Fiery Burst, which is really good for InsertName because elmikkino paid 3 mana for Fiery Burst in order to not let their opponent draw, and Veilborn Meddler still counters it as if it was a 1 mana spell. So InsertName taking 3 from Mattia, and top decking another Fiery Burst. So right now, elmikkino is probably going to just play Rapacious Rattler. InsertName has mana up for a Cosmic Sinkhole, but I think elmikkino is probably just going to run out Rapacious Rattler because they can't really risk holding back at this point. But no, elmikkino is hesitant to play Rapacious Rattler. Well, if Rattler gets Cosmic Sinkhole, then elmikkino probably just loses because Veilborn gets a counter, and then next turn Mattia swings the 4/4, and then Veilborn swings at a 2/2. But at the same time, if they don't play Rapacious Rattler, then what are they doing? They can Fiery Burst. They can double Fiery Burst, but that doesn't really get them any closer to winning the game. So something elmikkino can do is play Rapacious Rattler targeting face, and then Fiery Burst to face again. So that brings InsertName down to 6, and then next turn, if Sewer of the Sea survives, then it gets elmikkino down to 5, and then Fiery Burst gets it down to 2. So then elmikkino just has to top deck and their burn spell and not get blown out by anything. And InsertName decides to use the removal spell on the creature, getting a Veilborn Meddler trigger. So now that InsertName's tapped out, elmikkino's probably less worried about. Now that InsertName's tapped out, elmikkino's probably pretty willing to run out the Rapacious Rattler, but they have to use it as creature removal instead of face burn. And next turn, Mattia attacks the 4/4, so it doesn't block the but elmikkino is just going to use a 1-mana Fire Burst to kill the Mattia. So now they have 2 lands and an Ignition Point. Veilborn Meddler still counters Fire Burst, at least. So elmikkino attacks with Rapacious Rattler. Does InsertName flash in Mabel in order to chump block? Or no, they're going to they can just straight up Ignition Point the Rapacious Rattler to kill it. elmikkino decides to play Seer of the Sea first, and InsertName can just respond with the Veilborn Meddler to counter the 1-drop. Yeah, InsertName drawing this many Veilborn Meddlers against burn is really good for them, because a Veilborn Meddler is probably the strongest card that Temur Tempo, or against 4-color Tempo, in this 4-color Flash, Mabel, Temple, whatever deck they're running. It's the strongest card that they have against burn. It's a 2-mana 1/1 that counters a burn spell, or a 1-drop, which burn runs a bunch of, and then it can also grow to become a huge threat, and recall all their future creatures. elmikkino is going to Fire Burst face, just taking the opportunity to do so while InsertName is tapped out. InsertName draws Bounty of the Gardens, and that probably will just close out the game next turn. I don't see anything elmikkino can draw to prevent them from losing, or to get lethal, because elmikkino is running basically mono red burn, but splashing black for no good gun pointer and Hugo. And unlike some other burn decks like blue red burn, it doesn't have any way to refill, because blue red burn runs Mindstorm's Eye as a way to refill afterwards, and actually black red burn, so a really long time ago, before it was nerfed, black red burn ran Reckless Festivities as a way to reload after they ran out of cards, and that was back when Reckless Festivities costed 3 mana. And yeah, after that card got nerfed, black red burn got a lot worse, so to this day, burn decks are still looking for a cheap card that lets them refill. I don't think MSEM has an equivalent to Light Up the Stage, or at least something as efficient as Light Up the Stage in Canon Magic that allows burn decks to refill. And elmikkino is just going to concede after they see that Bounty of the Garden comes out. So yeah, the match has played out as expected. Temur Tempo, or 4-color Tempo in this case, manages to beat Vern pretty handily, especially by drawing that many Veilborn Meddlers.